What if I told you that the crown on a monarch's head isn't just a fancy hat made of gold and jewels? What if it's actually the physical form of an idea about power, divinity, and order that has, believe it or not, shaped our world for thousands of years? So today, we're not going to just list off a bunch of kings and queens. No, we're going to trace the incredible story of that idea, how it was born, how it grew to have absolute power, and then how it had to completely reinvent itself to survive in the modern world.
Right. For literally millennia, these things, the crown, the throne, they've been the hardware for one of history's most long-lasting operating systems of government. They represent an idea that has built empires, it's defined entire cultures, and, let's be honest, it still fascinates us to this day. So, here's the journey we're about to take. We're going to start with the absolutely mind-blowing concept of the God King. Then we'll see how rulers came up with a philosophical justification for their reign. We'll get to witness royalty at its absolute peak of power, and then watch it face these world-shattering challenges that almost destroyed it. And finally, we'll explore its really remarkable transformation into the institution we see today.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning. The oldest and maybe the most powerful claim to leadership wasn't just saying, hey, the gods approve of me. No, it was saying I am one of them. I mean, think about ancient Egypt. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler. He was considered a living god on earth, the actual embodiment of the god Horus walking among mortals.
And you can see two of the earliest flavors of this divine rule right here. Over in Mesopotamia, you had rulers who acted as priest kings. Think of them more like intermediaries, like shepherds, whose job was to manage the city for the gods. But in Egypt, the pharaoh's role was way more direct. He was a god. His very existence was believed to maintain the cosmic order of the universe, what they called Ma'at. So that's the crucial difference right there. One is a divine representative, and the other is divinity itself. So look, claiming to be a god is a pretty powerful move. But what happens if the harvests fail, or you lose a big war? Well, let's jump over to ancient China, where they developed this absolutely brilliant solution. It was basically a divine performance review for their emperors.
And this concept is called the mandate of heaven. This was not some lifetime appointment from the gods, okay? Think of it less like a divine right and more like a divine performance-based contract. The emperor, who was called the Son of Heaven, could only keep the mandate as long as he ruled well and was a just person.
And this contract created this really powerful repeating story throughout Chinese history. Just imagine it. A new dynasty rises up full of promise, and they claim the mandate. They bring order. Things are great. But then generations pass, and the rulers get corrupt, lazy. Suddenly, you've got floods, famines. These are all seen as clear signs that heaven is not happy. This basically justifies a new hero emerging from the chaos, overthrowing the old dynasty and claiming the mandate for themselves. And boom, the cycle begins all over again.
All right, so from that cyclical mandate in the East, let's fly across the globe to Europe, where the whole idea of kingship was getting boiled down into its most potent, most concentrated form ever: absolute monarchy.
This one quote, "I am the state," it just perfectly captures what absolutism is all about. It's attributed to France's Louis XIV, the Sun King. And it's not just him being arrogant, it's an entire political philosophy in just 4 words. It means the law, the nation's identity, the very will of the country, all of it comes directly from the person of the king.
So how do you pull it off? Well, Louis built this incredible machine of control. He completely neutralized the powerful nobility by basically luring them into his magnificent palace of Versailles, which was really just a gilded cage of endless parties and ceremony. He extended his personal reach into every province by sending out his own royal officials. He demanded religious unity, getting rid of protections for Protestants. And of course, he used constant warfare and super lavish art to glorify not just France, but himself as the living embodiment of France.
I mean, the age of absolutism seemed totally unshakable. But while monarchs were building these incredible monuments to their own power, dangerous new ideas about things like liberty, reason, and the rights of the people were starting to take root. And these ideas, they were about to turn the whole world upside down.
And you can literally see the chain reaction on this timeline. It really kicks off in England, where Parliament goes to war against its own king. Then the Enlightenment comes along and provides all the intellectual ammunition to question, well, all authority. This directly inspires the American Revolution, which proves, hey, a major nation can actually exist without a king. And it all culminates in the French Revolution, a massive explosion aimed at tearing down the very system Louis XIV had perfected.
All of this chaos was really fueled by one single question. A question that for most of history wasn't just treasonous, it was completely unthinkable. What are the limits of a king's power, and can he be judged by the very people he rules?
The answer came on a freezing cold January day in 1649. King Charles I of England wasn't quietly poisoned or stabbed in a palace coup. No, he was put on public trial, he was convicted of treason by his own parliament, and then he was beheaded in front of a crowd. That moment, it just shattered the mystical aura of divine right forever. If a king could be executed by his subjects, then the ultimate source of power wasn't heaven above, but the people right here on the ground.
The execution of a king. That was a point of no return. Royalty all across Europe were suddenly faced with a really stark choice: adapt or die out completely. And this forced the entire institution into its greatest and, honestly, its most fascinating transformation.
And this chart just brilliantly shows how radical that adaptation really was. I mean, look at the near-total governing power of an absolute monarch like Louis XIV versus the tiny sliver held by a modern constitutional monarch. But here's the key takeaway. This wasn't a failure. It was a survival strategy. Royalty managed to endure precisely because it strategically traded all that direct political power for symbolic influence and, well, longevity.
So what does this new role actually look like in practice? Well, they become a constitutional figurehead, a living symbol of the nation who stands above all the messy day-to-day politics. They are the custodians of tradition, connecting a country's present to its deep history. They serve as pretty unique diplomatic assets out on the world stage. And, of course, they've become global celebrities, a source of endless public fascination. They reign, but they do not rule.
And this brings us right to the central question for royalty today. We've seen its story as one of constant, radical change, from god to autocrat to symbol. It survived by trading away its political power for cultural permanence. So the real question for us now is, in a world that values democracy above all else, does this ancient idea still have a purpose? Is it a vital link to our shared past, or is it just a beautiful relic of a world we've long since left behind?